Joining us tonight are Deputy Mayor Andy McIntosh, Councillors Debbie Sherwood, Todd Taylor, Lisa Post, Joe Andrews, and Grant Peters, as well as our guest tonight, Chief Kalinsky, Deputy Chief Guilfoy, and Staff Sergeant McLagan. Council will not be commenting, debating, or making a decision on the matter this evening. The consultant's report will come before Council at a later date for debate and consideration. Please note that this meeting will be shown live on Rogers Cable 63. It will also be streamed on the Rogers website and on Orangeville Council's YouTube channel. The format of this meeting is as follows. A presentation will be made by Chief Kalinsky. Okay, I'm ahead of myself right here. I think what we need to do is have announcements by the chair, which is as follows. This meeting is being aired on public television and or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. To avoid disruptions during our meeting, we would appreciate if members of the audience would please turn off or mute your cell phones, Blackberries, or other personal digital devices. Orangeville Town Council welcomes and encourages members of the public to comment on matters of interest to them. However, delegates are cautioned that derogatory or inappropriate remarks may constitute slander and could potentially lead to legal action against them. If such comments are made, the delegate will not be permitted to continue speaking, and the comments will not be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. I'd like to have a motion from Council to approve the agenda. Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? Are there any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interests amongst Council members? Seeing none, would you please rise if you can, and we'll sing the national anthem. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of our command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. The format of this council meeting is as follows. A presentation will be made by Chief Kalinsky, Deputy Chief Guilfoy, and Staff Sergeant McLagan on behalf of the Orangeville Police Services. Members of the public will be invited to line up behind the microphones and may ask one question at a time. You'll be provided a maximum of 3 minutes to pose your question. I will advise you when you have 1 minute left. After 3 minutes, the microphone will be turned off. This is to facilitate providing all those in attendance an opportunity to ask a question. If you have more than one question, you may file to the back of the line and ask to have an additional question. Representatives of the Orangeville Police Service will attempt to respond to the question or will follow up and obtain the information. Responses will be provided at a later date and may be made available on the town's website. Upon there being no further questions from the public, members of council will have an opportunity to ask questions. Please refrain from repeating a question that has already been asked and from providing comments. Any individual wishing to ask questions or provide comments to council may do so at the council meeting scheduled on October 28th. You may also contact any member of council directly. The contact information for members of council is available on the town's website. You may also submit any additional questions you may have to oppcosting@orangeville.ca. You may view the questions and responses received to date at www.orangeville.ca/opp-costing-2019. Tonight's presentation is going to start shortly, and we're planning to run until 9 o'clock tonight. I now call upon Chief Kalinsky for opening remarks. Chief.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for attending this important meeting about your Orangeville Police. I'd like to introduce both Deputy Chief Leah Guilfoy and Staff Sergeant David McLagan. David will be doing the presentation shortly. I would like to acknowledge Council, present and past, members of the Orangeville Police Services Board, present and past, and the families and members of the Orangeville Police that are here tonight. Thank you very much for your support. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Dave, and we'll look forward to having your questions thereafter. Thank you.
Good evening. Again, my name is Dave McLagan. I'm Staff Sergeant with the Orangeville Police Service, currently in charge of operations. I'd like to address certainly our councillors here tonight, our citizens here in the audience, and bear with me, I'll get used to the microphone in a moment, and of course with our citizens both here and at home. Please bear with us as we go through this. There's a fair amount of material. I'm going to stop and pause as much as possible and hopefully be of an overall benefit to you in your investigation or your review of our service. I will set the stage a little bit before we go too much further. First off, there's two portions to our presentation this evening. First one focuses mainly on the service delivery model, or what you refer to, or I'll refer to both as standalone and as the Orangeville Police Service model, one and the same. The other thing I'll refer to at the last portion of our presentation tonight will, of course, be the financial portion. So really two distinct parts to our presentation today. A couple of things that I will ask, and really I'm going to give everyone some homework today, starting with our councillors and, of course, with our citizens as well. Two things. First, I understand we've recently gone through the process. You'll likely have your presentations from a couple of years ago. I applaud your efforts, and please all your investigation, whatever skills you are looking for. My presentation tonight, or our presentation rather, will focus on the Orangeville Police Service and what we do in 2019. And certainly for questions later, we're happy to answer those. But we're focusing on our police service and our model. Secondly, I'd like to ask that at the end of each slide, this is rhetorical, that you ask yourself, so what? Which is a very simple phrase that what's the value of the information I've just provided to you? What's the value of our service model? What's the value of the financial information I've given to you? And if you can answer that question of so what, then I've done the job right. And if you haven't, please feel free to come up and ask those questions afterwards, so there is a complete understanding of this material. It's imperative. This is a critical time in our history, a critical time for our service. I'm going to explain some key phrases for you as we go through. And again, if you're not in our environment every day, I understand a little bit this will seem bulky, or why would you use that phrase, or the legislation, or whatever it is. We'll try to break that down as much as possible. And I'll start with the one that, I don't know, just gets under my craw, which is called adequacy standards. You've heard adequacy standards and adequate and effective policing. What is that? I guess would be the question I'd like to answer. And no one wants to come to work today and say, you were adequate and effective. Good for you. Not a pick-me-up, right? So I'm going to call on Councillor Andrews. That's diligently looking at his papers, yes. And I'd like to say, Councillor, I appreciate your work with Humber, and you have a law security program, I understand. And I'm assuming it's fair to say that that program meets the provincial standards and adequate and delivers a wonderful program that we've had the pleasure of dealing with your students. Now, if I were to ask you that Georgian College has a similar program, I'm presuming that it also meets the effectiveness standards, provincial standards of their program. Now, if I were to ask both you and your colleague who had the better program, I'd say likely you're going to tell me it's yours. And why would that be? Work with me. Work with me. Likely that you've got a great school, you've got fantastic instructors, you've got a great environment in Orangeville, and the quality of the education, the quality of the product that's delivered is better. So what I ask you to say, or ask you to think, is when I say that adequacy and effective policing, that's the minimum standard. That is the minimum standard of delivery or service. We shoot for that every day to be more than adequate and effective. We want to be better than that. That's our goal as a service. See, that wasn't so bad. Do first, though. We'll see how it goes afterwards. All right. All right. Taylor, can I have the next? We're going to move on to community focus. And my first ask here of the audience, and again, I'm going to keep you engaged all night long. Do I have some military veterans here? I'm betting I do. And I know one sitting in the corner right over there, along with myself. Community focus is our motto. And many of us have a mission statement, values, and we believe in that. Our people believe in that. And I take this to the military reference. The military reference is one where, drilled into your head in basic training, whatever your regimental motto is, or if you're whatever arm of the military you're in my case, the infantry, drilled into my head every day was Ducamus. Ducamus is we lead. Our folks, our officers, are drilled in every day community focus. Community focus is that model that drives what we do every day. So if you think about all the other things, mission, vision, and values, those all play into that piece, but at number one day, our motto, our drive, our focus is community focus. What is community focus? So the slide in front of you here is a listing of 76 partners, agencies, referral groups that we deal with virtually every day. Now, I won't ask you to name them afterwards. That was going to be a test, but we came back from that. But 76, isn't that extraordinary? In Orangeville, those are the agencies that we deal with on a regular basis, either through referrals, direct referrals, and or just connection with the community to get that feedback and that engagement every day that we need to be successful. Without that, we don't know what the customer wants, to use a private industry reference. We need to know what you want, and it's daily. It is not a look at an annual report or stats at the end of the year and say, uh-oh, we missed that, there's a drug problem over here. Or there's a concern about traffic enforcement on Spencer Drive. We need to be on top of these things and listen to our community. That's the key to a standalone or the Orangeville Police Service model. Now, the check that the chief's presented, so in behind here, it's almost like a Where's Waldo, I appreciate that, is the food bank. And the chief's providing a check to that group. It's one of the fundraising efforts that we do as a service. And again, and you're going to hear this phrase from me over and over, is engagement and feedback, community engagement and feedback. That we keep a nimble response. As an agency of our size, one of the huge advantages is that we can change policy, practice, patrol efforts, zones to meet the needs of the community on a dime, to use a phrase, very quickly and very effectively, and it's clearly one of our strengths. So as we move the organizational chart, Taylor, I appreciate we can all review this at a later time, but one of the first things I'd like to focus on is the Police Services Board. You notice our organizational chart, the top is not the chief of the police, it's actually the board. You heard references to, under the Police Services Act, 2 different types of boards. I'd like to take a step back before we get to that act and that legislation. The reason why a Police Services Board is in existence is it's called a special purpose body under the Municipal Act. That means it's a standalone committee of the municipality. 3 municipal representatives and 2 provincial representatives. The intent of the legislation was to stop political bias into that organization so it wouldn't affect the operational requirements of a police service, yet still giving the municipality an opportunity to ensure that the values and missions and core factors of the municipality are integrated into that board. So that's why we have a police service board. And to meet those key functions is that integration of municipal and provincial reps. And to give back, and you'll notice it's 1 police service board to 1 police chief. It means that chief has the sole focus on that board, his direct report. It's an integral part of the way that we do business. It's an integral part of our community. This is community safety. This allows our kids to walk out at night and walk the streets and feel safe. It's because that board is our first citizens, the ones we deal with daily, to ensure that we meet those needs. They're critical partners to us in our success. Now, organizationally, and I won't go through all of these, I would like to emphasize we essentially have 2 arms. You've got an operational arm and you've got an administrative arm. All right, and they're defined in the Uniform Patrol, our Criminal Investigation Branch, which is a nice phrase for detective office in plain terms. Canine units, we have a number of things, and I'll go through our actual units on a later slide, but you'll just see kind of the layout that we have now. On the administrative side, that covers up court services, which of course is an integral part of what we do and our responsibilities here in Orangeville. And along with the administrative core portion, rather, professional standards, policy and planning, media relations, et cetera. And right on the top of that, you see the chief, and then below the administration, of course, the deputy, which overlooks both the operations and the administration of the service. All right. The last thing I'll leave, and before I leave my police service board, I do want to comment on one other thing. Thanks, Taylor. I appreciate that. The police service board also has the opportunity to pick your chief of police. Alignment is a huge portion of the requirements there to ensure that they're on the same vision, mission, values of the municipality. So picking your chief of police and or, by extension, who that succession planning is another way that that board puts your fingerprint on the face of the service and on who's delivering that service to you every day. Thanks, Tom. So response time and analytics. And for the councillors that I think we've all come through, either had a demonstration of our dashboard or through the police service board, you've seen that. And you probably got, if it came from me, I'm a keen guy for stats. I love that. I think it's an amazing tool. And every day, this is up in my office. I have a large dashboard. This is just a portion of what we do. So what I want to focus on, and one of the first things I mentioned was, I know you're going to do some comparison. So let's start with that. So in the last 2 years, we've done a fair amount of research and brought in a consultant to help us with analytics. And those analytics, I didn't know that apparently averages are by the wayside. Now we go to medians. Medians, if you remember from math class back in public school, median means half above and half below. It's that middle number right in the middle. So what I'd like you to take from this is that the median response time in the last 90 days for priority 1 calls, I mean, that's the highest priority call we could have, a violent crime in progress, is 7 minutes. So what that means is half of those incidents we were there in less time than that, and half were over. And it's our job to investigate why those will be over and look at those outliers. If you remember your stats, the outliers are, and is that a policy, is that a procedure, what happened? And then we do the follow-up to make sure that professionally we're doing our jobs. Median pending in minutes in the last 90 days. So what that means is that when the dispatcher picks up, you call the police station, when the dispatcher picks up that phone, within 2 minutes, she's sending a car to your call. Now, I wouldn't put these up here unless I know they're extraordinary, and I do. These are performance measures that are industry-wide, not for policing, but fire, for EMS as well. It's an easier performance measure, and again, I'll call on our former fire chief in front of us. It's what we look at every single day. And if we don't meet those standards, we do our investigation to find out why. Is there a mitigating circumstance? And there's all sorts of risk and liability attached to that. On the right-hand side of the slide, you'll see, and this is where the fun for me gets in. So I like to look at the trends. Let's get ahead of things. Let's see what's starting to come to the forefront. So these are the top 10 event types in the municipality in the last 90 days. Routine traffic stop. There's over 2,000 traffic stops that have occurred already year to date within our 16 kilometers. 2,000 times, if you think about that, is an extraordinary amount of interaction. And that's not just for tickets. That's education. That's, you've got a taillight out. Are you lost? Can I help you? That's interacting with the community. And that's also, when I stop in your subdivision, hey, we've had a problem with that stop sign down the street. Are you able to help us out with that? Can we get some enforcement here? I've had a question about that. That's a community service portion of it. That's direct interaction with our community every day, multiple times a day. The stats show that the majority of people who deal with the police, that's what you do. It's a traffic stop. That's your interaction with us. A large percentage of the population really rarely, if ever, deals with the police either for a record check or a traffic stop. So I'm happy with that, and it better stay there. You'll see on down. Now, and here's my first plea. As the operations guy at the service, I see 911 calls that have sprouted up in the last, 60 days to an unhealthy medium of over 200 in the last 90 days. 911 calls. So let's think about that for a minute. So policy-wise, I have to send a trained officer in a cruiser to your house because you pocket dialed or that your kids were playing with the phone. If you can think about the cost of that, to have that officer do that, and the infrastructure required to support the officer while he's there, we need to stop that. So here's my first community plea this evening. Please tell your friends. Let's be careful with our phones. Let's make sure we put those on silent. No more pocket dials, please. Secondly, you'll notice at the bottom, as I'll pick out here, is the alarms. Alarms are starting to show over 100 in the last 90 days. The bulk of alarms are false. So again, I need an officer and cruiser. I need a radio infrastructure. We need computers. We need dispatchers. We need phones. Months and years of training to respond to that false alarm at your business. So we have a false alarm bylaw, but again, I implore you, those are business owners and community, and including our municipal building partners here as well, check that, please. Those resources need to be going somewhere else. So this is part of the fun I have every day, and I thought I'd share that with you a little bit as well. So my final takeaways are that when you need an officer, you're going to get one. You're going to get him in a hurry, him or her in a hurry. All right? The analytics are huge. And you've heard the phrase of evidence-based decision-making. You've also probably heard the phrase of intelligence-based policing. In simplest terms for the private sector, it's evidence-based decision-making. So from this and the other dashboard analytics you saw at your stopping with us, make sure we've got the amount of officers we need at the time of the calls, not when we don't need them, that we're meeting our performance standards, our own measures, that we're doing that in a timely manner. And then as we start to see trends, we actively participate in trying to mitigate those trends and stop those, be it at a community meeting saying, please watch your phones more carefully, talk to your kids, or other methods, or through our community media officer at the back row there, Mr. Davis, I'm sure you're all familiar with. So as we move more specifically into our service delivery model, and I've phrased it on the top, Taylor? Standalone. Now, even after I finished writing this, I should have just called it Orangeville. But standalone essentially means the police service is working with its own municipality, is that. And then the model itself is derived from the way that we do business. All right. So we operate out of 2 locations. The first one is 390 C Line, that's the headquarters. And out of that headquarters, we have a number of different units here. From General Patrol, that's the officer you see in a cruiser. That's around that responds to your routine calls. All right. In addition to that, we have supervisory officers that review that and act as the next resource for the officers that respond. The Criminal Investigations Bureau, it's our detectives. In specialty skills, depending what it is, be it frauds or more serious person crimes, that specialty training unit takes over. And again, all located within our headquarters. So a nice seamless integration from the uniformed patrol officer who may went initially to the detective there as well. Further, our K9 unit. It's also based out of there and on call. So to have their resources is a fantastic opportunity for us as well. Communication Center. Now, Communication Center, I know we've had in the media the last few years, be it through 911, through various presentations. The Community Center is an outstanding resource to have in a community of our size, supporting not only us, but Dufferin County. So the integration abilities that we have, and again, I'm going to call on our former fire chief as well, the ability to have police and fire on the same fire channel with the same dispatcher is extraordinary. It just makes things simpler, faster, more effective, and better delivery back to the citizen. Now, we do that for the entire county, actually, from fire on all the other townships and the Shelburne Police Service as well. It just makes for seamless integration. And if you look at many of the inquests, or even after 9/11, one of the biggest criticisms was our inability to communicate with each other. And that we break down those barriers such that we're not standalone entities, that we communicate effectively and efficiently. Front desk and records. That other thing I mentioned about a criminal record check. And for those of you who've gone into the station, I've got I want to go along with my son's field trip. We're going to whatever it is, Kenner's Wonderland or something. It's a pain, isn't it? Got to go in. If my name's common, I likely have to get my fingerprints taken, et cetera, et cetera. So we've tried to do our best to keep that open for you. It's 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. daily. The staff there, we can do what we call an express check to get that done for you while you wait even. So again, it's about service delivery, because you know what? We're all busy. If the kids' field trip happens to be tomorrow and you meant to get there last week, I run down the station, it's after work, I just got home, and here's my opportunity. Hey, I can get it done tonight at 8 o'clock? Yes, you can. So it's that extra portion of our Orangeville model of policing that makes a big difference here. You'll see some technical stuff here. When I mentioned drug recognition expert, so what exactly is that? So we refer to them as DREs, and the DRE is essentially human intoxilizer or breathalyzer. You remember those machines, or that you've seen them on TV? They really tell you the level of intoxication. For alcohol, we can have you blow into the machine, it'll give us a reading. And very simply, we can say that reading is over or under. For drugs, we can't do that. So we actually use a human that is the equivalent of that intoxilizer, for really simplistic terms. All right? So to have one of those also is a coup for us in Orangeville, serving our city. Training unit, critical for policing. Over the last, at least even in my career, last 23 years, the training component has increased exponentially, and rightly so. What we do today is very specific, the skill sets required have gone up exponentially, and you need the right people doing the right jobs at all times. Reconstruction services. when you have a serious accident or a serious motor vehicle collision with an injury or a death, the expectations of the investigation are higher. We bring in, or we have on our own staff, our reconstruction experts that actually will do the measurements and help you determine that cause. It helps in the case of a serious injury or death for that family, at least to give them some type of, here's how it happened. Sometimes it's simple, but at least to have that expert look at it and say, this is in fact what occurred. Community Services Officer. Hopefully he needs no introduction in the back row, but Scott Davis has been our Community Service Officer for a number of years and does a fantastic job. A big portion of those community-focused organizations are day-to-day contacts for Scott, and we appreciate his efforts going forward. The newer officer that you're probably very familiar with, but new in the last couple of years, is Bruce Lemke. I'm not sure Bruce is with us tonight, but our Foot Patrol Officer downtown. And certainly Bruce will happy to talk to you, take your suggestions and your feedback, and make sure it gets in to the right spaces, the right places. Court services. We'll talk more about that in another couple of slides, but another integral portion, a large portion of our budget, and one of our key responsibilities for our service. And finally, our auxiliary policing unit. And I don't mean to put them last, other than to make sure that they are identified specifically. These are 14 volunteers that have dedicated their spare time and energy to our service and to our community, more specifically. Fantastic. We were able to train them. They're a great help to us either on the road, on an extra night, a weekend night, or remember specifically, you've probably seen them at various events, either at Food Bank, Tots for Toys, Rib Fest, those type of things. The officer will have an auxiliary police on their chest, and they're volunteer. On their free time, they want to wear a bulletproof vest and heavy cotton polyester clothing and volunteer and serve the community. What a fantastic resource. And Taylor next. Thank you. That's Constable Ryan Kett, for those of you who may recognize Ryan. So, continuing with the Orangeville model, we've already discussed that it's open from 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. our front desk. But what you may not realize is that the communications center is also in that same building. And that operates 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, year-round, stat holidays included. So there's always someone in that building. So if you're in distress, if you need a safe place, you're able to come to station any time of the day, get into that kiosk, they'll buzz you into that safe area. And if an officer's not in the building, we'll make sure you get one, apparently in less than 7 minutes, all right, if it's an emergency. So again, to have that resource, or it's a Kijiji purchase or exchange, you're not sure about the other person, you want to do that in a place of safety, please, come to us. Patrol zones. I touched on patrol zones lightly. What we've done is divide the city or town of Orangeville into several patrol zones based on population, call volume, and again, that's flexible. We can do that however we need. One patrol zone could be Broadway for the night, or we're having a problem in it's an event, we're having issues on Mill Street, let's say, at one of the bars, or something to that effect. It's the ability to change focus quickly, nimbly, and meet the needs of the community. If we have a problem area, be it in a park or, again, after closing for some of the bars, those zones and that style of policing or dedicated patrol help us recognize and meet those needs. I talked about referral partnerships and the community focus, and I'm going to show you a couple of stats here shortly on that. But modern policing today isn't just enforcement. You've seen huge increases in the way that we deal with mental health calls, huge increases with human trafficking. And as a police officer, I do it very well, but I'll certainly be the first one to admit that there's areas that I'm not comfortable with, and I'm sure I can speak for most of my colleagues. There's areas we're not as strong in, and we're looking for those partnerships and those referrals to make it a more effective solution for our client or a victim or our customer. So we'll talk more about that, and I'll use not a case example, but an example that really frames that for you. And the other portion, again, not for the first time, but not for the last time, community feedback and input. Throughout, from Bruce Lemke or from Constable Lemke out downtown, through Scott Davis, through any of our officers on that traffic stop, through the chief and through the deputy at the various events. Constant feedback. We want to hear from you. If your car was gone through overnight, there was a theft from your vehicle overnight, please call. You may not know that your neighbors also had that. Maybe we had a suspect. Maybe we charged somebody. Maybe we've got your ownership or something that was taken from the car. It's not a bother. We want you to call. And the last thing I'll talk about here is referrals in the way that we're doing business in a modern sense. We're using a couple of key agencies, which I'd like to throw out, is Dufferin Caledon Victim Services, Family Transition Place, situation table are some of our key referrals that occur on a daily basis. These are the great agencies that help us do that transition. And I will give a shout out to Sergeant Archer here. In some of our preparatory meetings, she mentioned this, and I thought it was really poignant, which is a quote from Gandhi. I never thought I'd say that. The true measure of any society can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable members. And so very true today. Thank you. Which, of course, is a nice segue into the court services slide. So court services, and we want to split this off really because it's another location. It's another physical location, which is 10 Louisa Street. I don't know if everyone realizes that we're responsible for courts as well for Dufferin and Caledon. So the population base for Dufferin and Caledon is around 120,000. So that court building is a busy court building. We're responsible for the safety of all that attend, be it for family court, for traffic court, for criminal court, the judiciary, our crowns, our defense lawyers, all our witnesses and players within the court system. 1,300 prisoners go through that cell block every year on average. So it's a pretty busy place. Okay? We do have technology, and you'll see a theme throughout our presentation about embracing technology, leveraging technology to do our jobs more effectively. At the single point entry, it's actually the newest one in the province. We can't take the credit. I mean, that's certainly something from MAG, but you know what? It shows that it's in keeping with the way that we do business. We're just trying to be on the cutting edge, punching above our weight, to use that analogy. Not just Orangeville, but we're taking it beyond that. Right. Thanks, Deb. And OPS by the numbers. I like these slides. You know, when we started to do some of the research for this presentation, it hit me actually when I look, and I hope it does the same thing for you. So when you ask that question at the end of our slide, so what? Here's what you can refer to. So traffic stops year to date. This is 2019 year to date. 2,381. And that was Thursday, Friday morning, so I'm sure it's over that now. Referrals to the Dufferin Situation Table, which is 35 or 83% of the total. So I see that and I went, great, we've got buy-in. Our staff is buying into this as a great resource and a great thing for our community and our citizens. 503 referrals to the Caledon Dufferin Victim Services, or 73% of their total. Again, we're buying in. It's good. It's the best service for our clients and for our citizens. Give them the referrals. Get these people, if it's a mental health issue or something else, or it's a housing issue, get them out of the justice system and get them into the right resource. Okay? 16-minute median response time to priority 4 calls. Boy, that's that police jargon again. So what's a priority 4 call? Priority 4 call is a fraud that occurred 6 months ago. That's a noise complaint about a barking dog that you called 6 or 7 hours afterwards. It's our lowest priority call. So when I saw 16 minutes, boy, we had to share that. 16 minutes for the lowest priority of our calls is a median response time. That's pretty extraordinary. Again, back to the service level, foot patrol hours, 744.5 year to date. 744 hours of foot patrol. Now that's through the parks, that's through Casey Gardens, that's through Every Kid's Park, that's through Victoria Park, that's through all our parks, along with, of course, our downtown beat. Schools. So I did mention that Constable Lemke also hits every high school at lunch hour, or both the high schools at lunch hour, and spends as much time as he can building those bridges as well, along with, again, Constable Davis is doing the same thing on the program delivery. Right? And finally, 60,800 police service hours annually to our community. 60,000 hours, person hours. Taylor? We had so much I had to create 2. 25,410 records checks completed in 2018. And sorry, this whole slide will be 2018, not 2019. 25,000. Now, a large portion of those are done by third-party criminal record check companies, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. Most recent survey, which unfortunately is dated, indicates 86% of our citizens are satisfied with the level of service. They feel safe. Our clearance rates meet or exceed the national averages. I won't go into clearance rates. It becomes painful to explain those, or the crime scene index. But what I will refer you to is our annual report, which I'm not sure if we've got some around, but if not, it's online, available through our website. Crime Severity Index puts us in the top 16% of safest communities in the country. Top 16%. So I'd like to take credit for that, or we the current leadership would like to take credit for that, but that's not. That's years. That's many years of the foundation of Orangeville and what Orangeville, the town, has built over the last 155 years. That you create a community of this safety level takes partnerships. It takes partnership with our municipal government, our municipal partners, if bylaw, all components here. The citizens themselves, we want to create a safe community. Okay? Not a well-known, or sorry, it's not a secret, but there's many more police officers that live in Orangeville than actually work here. And they picked this community because it's safe. We have the advantage of knowing where the crime rates are and where do I want to grow with my family. And I picked Orangeville. I think that says volumes as well. All right, Taylor? Calls for service. Now, I think the trend is relatively obvious, starting back in 2011. And starting to level off about 2015 to 2018, but still a gradual increase. So these are our calls for service. So calls for service in our terms is when either you call us for whatever the case may be, or break and enter or something to that effect, or we generate that call. It's a traffic stop, and at that traffic stop we find a driver that's suspended, shouldn't be driving, or no insurance, or impaired or something. So that's how those combination of records occur. We also try to track all of our activity. We also have administrative occurrences that we call RM numbers that track when we take an administrative duty of some sort. The idea is that we understand the need to articulate what we do and articulate it very well for you. 2 years ago taught us a harsh lesson, and we need to have stats and analytics that we now have in droves to demonstrate our value and our feedback in our community service. So we've embraced that, and again, as you see, we're a busy little service. All right. So we're now moving to part two, if you phrase that appropriately, is you'll have seen this in our budget presentation from earlier this year. It's also in our annual report with a slight deviation on, I've added 2019 to this as well. So the trend, as you see, our net budget back to 2014 was 8.2 million. And I'll leave the answer for this to our Treasury partner I saw earlier. In 2018, they did a redistribution and lowered our budget to 8.1. But effectively, it's the same. And then you'll see from 2018 and 2019 that that budget's now 8.1. So the trends I'd like to pick out clearly is that we're not only meeting that budget but coming underneath with a sizable surplus. The total returned actually in the last 5 years is over 800,000, returned back to the general reserves of the municipality. It's not a rebate, but it's if we can do our jobs more effectively, deliver our service, and still return some money to the municipality, I think that's a great thing. Now, how do we compare? And I said I wouldn't compare, but I'm going to make this one comparison with regard to the rest of the province. So is there any other police service in your mind that has done this in the last 5 years in the province of Ontario? And that answer will be no. Actually, and I'll ask, not to put Mr. Brennan on the hot seat, but arguably there's probably not a department here that's done the same thing in the last 5 years. We get it. We're accountable, we're transparent. We know that financial responsibility, fiscal responsibility is key to us in continuing with the Orangeville Police model. Further to that, we built our reserves. So we've added money to offset capital requests later because we have to buy cars. There's infrastructure that occurs for every department, and we're certainly no different that way. We need radio infrastructure and computers and those type of things. So by putting some of our budget towards reserves, we can offset some of those purchases later. All right, Taylor? I'll refer you to the next several slides are taken from our budget. We've done our best to frame them in a way that it's easily comparable for you. It's not normally the way that we do our budget, so bear with me. If there's any mistakes here, I certainly own those. But the source document for, and we rely on for the last several years, is the Orangeville Police Service's budget, which is posted on their website and available through Treasury. So I'll break this down quickly by the positions. So what you see here on the left-hand side are the positions specifically. If there's one individual, you'll see one with the salary of that position. That's the base salary, and then the total salary. So for example, we have 6 sergeants. So you see the base salary of a sergeant multiplied by 6 gives you the cost for that. 29 constable is a part-time constable, and then we have 2 vacant positions at this time for a total. So 42 officers currently allotted to the Orangeville Police Service. Now, on the bottom of that, we've taken the budget, and again, most of these are clean, but if not, I'll express it. So overtime, we do have a budget line item for overtime, which is very simply $167,000. The experience pay, so a base salary in the provincial arbitration system for policing is pretty close. We're all within about $2,000 of each other across the province, regardless of which agency you work for. Experience pay is an incentive that was provincially arbitrated, and now all services have it as well. And what that really means is that the officer that's 3 or 4 years on, that's not first-class constable, makes the base rate. But if that officer's been on for 8 years or 17 years, there's different incentives that are added onto that salary. So I wasn't able, I can't average clearly in this setup. So what we've taken is all experience pay and then lumped that into one category here for him. Further shift premiums, we were able to calculate out as well. And then finally, the uniform benefits in total. So uniform benefits is not just your health care, dental. That could also be a specialty pay. For some of the detective office, there could be incentives or service pays. Other things that add into those overall benefits. So there are some generic categories. It's the best we could do to make it comparable for you, but please refer you back to the actual town budget. And as we move to civilian salaries and benefits, so civilian salaries, court security officers, so the staff that's working at 10 Louisa Street are the first couple of categories here. So the full-time complement that works in court security and the part-time complement, again, their base salaries and then total multiplied by the amount of positions we carry. The court services secretary actually works at 390C line and coordinates through electronically. The records data entry clerks are our key record staff at the front of the foyer or the front of the building at 390 when you come into it. Security checks clerk, that position is tied to our third-party criminal record checks. It is fully funded by that revenue stream or funding source. And we'll talk a bit more about that shortly. An administrative position, and then finally, auxiliary police. And I always like to point out $0 for salary. Yes, there's some uniform equipment costs for that, but again, those 14 individuals donate their time to us in the community. Split out is overtime, and then finally their benefits as well for total civilian salaries and benefits. And if we move to support services now. The support services, or probably better described as our communications center. So communications center, we currently have 8 full-time positions. 5 are part-time positions for a total complement of 13 communicators. We split out again overtime and benefits in the separate category, and then your total civilian salaries. So the total Orangeville Police Service salaries and benefits are $8.898. Other direct operating expenses. Again, I had to combine some categories to make this as comparable as possible, but I think it does give you a reflection of what it takes to support the service. So your facilities management is gas, hydro, cleaning, snow removal. Any of those type of facility maintenance costs are lumped into facilities management. Phone system. Phone system is not just the phone bill. Phone system is also the lease or purchase of that. Our phones today are basically computers on your desk. So there's a cost associated to that as well. Fleet management. So insurance and fuel for our fleet. I can break it down a little bit for you. Fleet management. So essentially we're about $56,000 to $60,000 worth of gas a year for our fleet, and the rest of that is for insurance. Fleet maintenance, so to maintain the uniform and plane cars fleet. Is under fleet maintenance, uniforms and equipment. We don't split out anything more. We don't do it by officer. As most of our officers are already equipped, it's an ongoing maintenance. When we do hire an officer, there's a one-time purchase, but it's not split up. It's very incrementally. Training. So the training budget is over and above recruits. So that's everything that's ongoing in-service training to maintain our pistol qualifications, use of force, taser, those type of things. Excuse me. In addition to more senior courses. I see Detective Weiland here, who's just about on his way to the fraud course. Very excited, I can tell. Again, that's a specialty function of our detective office to investigate more serious or more complex frauds. It takes additional training and experience to be able to work through those investigations. Radio communications and licensing. So radio communications, that's a maintenance fee that we pay to our provider. That's the actual license cost to operate those radio waves. That is the maintenance of the equipment or replacement of equipment, all to make that radio click and so we can be heard and transmit throughout the county. Computer operations and supplies. So that's your licensing for your software, new computers as they go through the cycle of every 4 years, in addition to any other type of tech things as well. And again, I'm a proponent of technology. I think it's leveraged and enable us to do many, many things, but there's a cost to it, of course. All right, internal transfers. So internal transfers, we transfer part of our budget to 3 other departments within the municipality. There's a small portion to HR, a portion to Treasury. The bulk of that goes to our IT support. So we pay a portion, which is about a salary plus of an IT person that's coordinated and run by the manager of IT here at the municipal headquarters, or town hall rather. Police Services Board as well is split out. And then our general insurance, our general liability insurance. And finally, you'll see other administrative expenses, which is everything else. There's a smaller dollar amount, but we put into that category. So there's a fair amount there. But hopefully that gives you a good idea of what it takes generally to run that service. I don't think you want to know what postal and paper costs, but they're all portions of that too. And if we move on to revenues and capital. So on the revenue side of the house, we dispatch at, I believe I mentioned earlier, 3 fire departments, or 3 fire services rather, in the county. So Shelburne, Melbourne, Blankton, and Grand Valley. That's an external partner. We also dispatch for the Shelburne Police Service. So as those external partners, we do dispatch an invoice to them to provide that service. You know, the next line is the interdepartment fire and public works fees. So the bulk of that is for fire. It's done internally for our Orangeville firefighters. These, and I'd like to make this first. One, we're not a not-for-profit. We'll start that again. We're not here for profit. That's not our goal. We see the goal of providing these services to the county as a better service delivery option. We provide these services under the provincial standards or under the provincial capital fees. So for example, fire dispatch for a full-time fire department is usually well in excess of $3. It's up to $5 or $8 per capita to dispatch a full-time fire department. Our fees are substantially lower than that. We also do that with the county because, again, we believe that service delivery is more integral over a small amount of increase in revenue. So I may be corrected shortly, but that has been our goal before, is to make sure that these are our partners in delivering emergency services, and that's a critical portion of what we do. Further, you'll see reports, which is just a request, for example, of an insurance company that'd like a copy of the motor vehicle collision report, for example. Paid duties. Paid duties are a line item where every police service will provide a paid duty officer for, let's say, traffic instruction, or let's say a stag and doe, and you're serving alcohol or you have some concerns, you can hire a police officer. There's no cost to the agency or to the municipality for that. We bill those costs out, including administrative fees, back to that partner agency. Miscellaneous revenues is a variety of hodgepodge of areas. The 3 larger items you'll note are the grants. So the provincial or 1,000 officer program, which is in the process of changing as we speak. That grant dollar amount of $180,000. Our provincial court grant security, which has risen significantly. I was doing well earlier, wasn't I? It's risen actually since 2014. It's almost doubled actually, and I think it was through administratively articulating our costs better and starting to see compensation for that. That's now measurably around the same as what it actually costs us to run the court, or very close. And then finally, the third-party criminal record checks. So this is a business. We are authorized to do criminal record checks for third-party companies at a basic level outside of the city boundaries. and we can sell that service. And when we looked at this as a business opportunity originally, and we're talking about cops, so we had to keep it very simple. How do we do this? We have capacity in some areas, and we use some of that capacity to build a business. So in about 3.5 years, we're forecast, and we're still learning how to forecast properly, but our forecast is over $500,000 revenue from a business we started in 2015, the end of 2015. So we're very, very proud of that, and we see growth opportunities continuing there and for the next many years. So other revenues and capitals listed there. For this coming year, we just have one fleet transfer, one revenue transfer, and then our net budget, as indicated earlier, of 8.1. Now, facilities review. Adequacy standards. Oh boy. The minimum standard for our building, we are audited regularly. We provide reviews of ourselves. Every 4 years, there's an audit category dictated by the province and policing standards, and our building is reviewed to do that. Having been built in 2006, we've been fairly lucky that really any modification has been very minor. But I can say to you unequivocally that there are no requirements to modify our building at this time. We meet the provincial adequacy standards, the minimum standard for our building. It's cells, sally port, et cetera. We have invested in the last several years with radio infrastructure, our phone system, security system, video system. We have some very top-of-the-line equipment there that we invested in looking for the long term, be it 10 years or 15 years, that these items will take us through, hopefully post even my retirement. Further to that, I mentioned that reserve. The reserve that we do as part of our overall budget and maintenance to try to offset some of those capital costs. So for example, as we're starting to prep for our 2020 budget right now, we're going to use some of those reserves, and as we present that to our board in the next month or so, have an opportunity to reduce the capital request, and again, burden back to the taxpayer. And I will applaud the Council of 2006 that partnered with the Orangeville Hydro to build this site. It's a fantastic site. It's a great location with lots of room to grow. So that foresight will help take us for many, many years to come. Sharing in that, even just the generator, for example, is a great example of Orangeville Hydro that we partner with that to feed the electricity to the building without having to make that investment initially in a generator, which can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then the maintenance for it. So that's picked up with Orangeville Hydro as a partner of ours. So. Now we'll move on to economic impact. So there's clearly some hard realities, and I appreciate there's some very hard decisions coming in the next few months. I'd like to put a bit of a face on some of those decisions. So severance costs. I know the mayor mentioned it earlier today, but some of the investigation of what those costs will be. So we do need to know that there's about 69 employees, and this fluctuates, give or take, 69 employees currently. And we live here, we shop here, we buy houses, we buy our groceries, we buy our cars. We live and work in the community. I'd like to give you an economic impact dollar to say, here's what our employees do, here's what they spend in the community, and the potential loss to that. But I will say, and I think I'm safe to say that there would be an impact. If you lose jobs and salaries of, and as you just saw our salaries, we make a contribution to our community every day. So what impact would that have? I don't know, but I will guarantee you we'll have an impact. When those salaries go, and those retailers, or those government agencies, or those big box stores reduces their revenue, that makes it more difficult for them to pay those taxes to help support the rest of the community. So it's a consideration I hope that you will also look at. For those of you who were here during the Pfizer plant when that closed down and those jobs left, I hope some of those retailers remember those times and what impact, and maybe you can bring a voice to our councillors and educate them on the impact that that had at that time. What I will like to say as well, I would like to pass along, is that the severance process, we're looking forward to Mr. Mitchell's report as well later. What that's going to be. From our investigation, all I can say to you is that I hope that you will look at that, what the severance agreements were. We've looked at both Midland and Espanola, and about 20 to 30% of those officers were not transitioned to the OPP for a variety of reasons. So of course, those costs will be a burden here, along with civilians as well. So it's certainly a number, and it's a real number that will impact a number of citizens here, and my co-workers, and our citizens all. I would also like to mention that the collective agreement of our uniformed and civilian staff includes a clause of 5 weeks of pay per year of service, of severance. That was based on a provincially arbitrated decision from another police service to downsize. So 5 weeks of severance per year of service. And if your next question is how many years of service are in the police service, it's over 1,000 with our current staffing complement. More financial considerations. So if we stay, no startup costs or building renovations. No tax increase to compensate for the increased startup costs or depletion of reserves. I don't know what the facilities review has come back with and what requirements are to change the building, but I would implore you not to mortgage our future with taking large amounts of our reserves to pay off this decision and to balance that over the impact of the next 10 or 15 years. Revenue streams, I've mentioned that as well. So the growth in 3 years, 4 years, I like to ask that we have a chance to build that even more. I'll challenge you to push us to see what we can really do with that business. You've seen evidence of our fiscal responsibility in what we do. We are a proven commodity. And I don't say that because of the last 5 years. I say that because of the last 155 years. So the last 155 years, our model of service has been developed and distributed and maintained. It's attracted people to this community. You want to live here. You commute to your jobs elsewhere because we want to be in Orangeville. And that's been based on and built by the public safety, along with our partners here, to provide this municipality that we all enjoy and love and live in. Further, I'd ask, on your so what other municipalities have looked at this, been through this process, and I know you will, but two specifically, and in doing our research, Mr. Mitchell, actually, I think could probably speak to this even. He looked at Leamington and Aurelia recently for looking at their other options, dissatisfied with the service and what can they do. And I say this point more so because once this decision is made, there is no going back. There's no other top. The capital infrastructure to recreate a municipal police service is cost prohibitive, very simply. Okay? And if I can move to the final slide, gentlemen. I always start with 155 years because that's so impactful. And as a student of history, if it works, I don't know why we need to fix it. We constantly change because that's what we do, we adapt. But we have a stable budget. Our trend has been consistent, and the management structure that we have and the accountability, the way that we do business is effective. We've got additional growth opportunities. We've got a staff committed to our motto, which is community focused again. The standalone model, you're not alone. The standalone model is of every medium to large size municipality in the province. We're getting there. We're increasing our densities. Our density is on par with Richmond Hill and Markham. So why would we go to an integrated or a larger model? You've got what you've grown it, it's here, let's maintain it. If you subcontract out, say HR, to use a private industry example, that's easy to reconstitute if that service provider is not doing what you're looking for in a short period of time. This is monumental. I hope here tonight that you've seen some of our, and I meant to end it on a high note, but I think this is it's a good reality for all of us. We love our service model. We're very proud of it. We're very proud to be here. I'm very honored to actually be able to give the meat of this presentation tonight. We'd like to have that opportunity to continue and serve our citizens and continue with what we do. So with that, I would like to turn it back over to Chief Kalinsky.
We'll look forward to taking any questions from the audience.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to set up a couple of microphones. Thanks, Dave. So if you would like to ask a question of any of our guests tonight. Town council will not be receiving questions tonight, but the floor is open for any questions to our Orangeville Police Service representatives. If you'd like to step up, anybody? Can you state your name for the record, sir?
Okay, Your Worship, my name is Nick Gristo. I live on 20 Paula Court, L9W5V1, Orangeville, Ontario.
Thank you.
I guess my question to the chief is, Chief, I know the answer, but I think it's for the audience, not just here, but at home. Could you tell us how many years since you became chief you deliver at zero budget for our municipality? Sir, thank you.
We've been fortunate enough to have a 0% budget increase for the last 5 years. We return an average of $217,000 per year, and that's not an easy task.
Thank you.
Now, if I can make just a comment anyway.
No, sir. No, sir, we're not doing this, not tonight, Nick. Thank you. Yeah. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Gristo.
Anyway, I want to let you know that quite a few years ago, it's over 20 years ago, I stood before the audience at the night. I was not a member of council. I was only a business person in the town of Orangeville those days, where they were looking to go OPP. As a businessman, I stood before the crowd that night and the council that day and asked them to please stay with our police force. The town look from 20 years ago to what we are today. We're going to grow possibly 36,000 people. You can get a better police force than your own force. I'm not trying to put down the OPP. They're good on their job, but they're good on their job in the rural areas. That's where they're good at their job. Here, with the size of the population and the way it's growing, we need our own police force. I want to let you know, I'll stand behind, and I hope the council will hear those comments, because I had to make that decision. It wasn't easy for me either. With some numbers came at the time, was speculated over $4 million savings, which that was never the case. But I never lost sight, because the best police force is your own force, and I'll stand behind that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir. You state your name and address, please.
Sure. My name is Noel Ramsey. I live at 15 Feed Street here in Orangeville. Just some questions with regards to one of the charts there. Maybe you can go to it. I don't know if it's the OPS net operating cost comparison. As a resident of the town, obviously concerned with taxes and stuff like that, I've been kind of crawling through the budget and through the OPS presentations in the past, and a lot of the town's budget numbers, as well as the, what do they call it, the auditor's review of previous years. So I'm concerned when I see some of these numbers and how they're presented and how they add up. If you take a look across the bottom there, it says calls for service, and you'd mentioned that that's like traffic stops or people calling in. And every year it seems to be around 20,000, 20,000, 22,000, 20,900, 21,000. And then already this year, 19,942 year to date. So that tells me that, I'm assuming you put this together probably around September the 6th, call it September, you're looking at 80 calls per day.
Thank you. Remember when I mentioned the any mistakes are mine? Thanks, sir.
Okay, because
That's not 19,000 year to date. Thank you for that.
yeah, because you'd be trending 29,000 calls.
No, when I looked at the call queue today, I think it was around 12,000.
Okay.
12,000 right now.
Matter of fact,
Slightly more than 2018.
Okay, so that was my one question. If anyone else has a question, or if I can ask another question?
Let's go over here first, and then we'll come back. Ma'am, your name and address, please?
My name is Jennifer Beauregard. I'm not comfortable giving my home address because this is public. And
You're an Orangeville resident?
I am indeed.
All right.
I was very impressed with the presentation in how you reinforced the value of having local officers, but also responsiveness to particular needs within our community. The Toronto Police Chief, I believe, just recently came out and talked about the correlation between their climbing numbers in serious crime and their difficulty in retaining officers locally. In fact, 3/4 of their officers do not live where they police. So I was just curious if you had been in contact, because I do know that you communicate and share information with other forces. How is Orangeville, in its current model, leading some of that initiative of retaining community-based policing, even for larger forces?
Go ahead.
Okay, that was a long question. So we are community focused. We are all about looking after.
Excuse me, Deputy Chief, could you grab the mic there, just so the
Can you
folks
hear
at home can hear it properly?
Okay, sorry. Hello. Okay, that was a very long question. And I'll try to get to the basis of it. We are a community-focused team. We focus all of our resources on our 16 kilometers worth of area. And we do our best to look after the people in our communities, especially the vulnerable people in our communities. And we are lucky to have a lot of our police officers live within the town. And so they take pride in being police officers here. They take pride in helping to get to the root causes of issues. So we have very dedicated officers, and we're hoping that we can maintain them as well as grow them. So I don't know if I answered the whole question.
Yeah, it was just very timely that your presentation really reiterated the value of not only living in the community, but the historical living in the community. And to look at a large force like Toronto that kind of leads the way at returning to the very core values of what community-based policing does. And they have a significant problem with 3/4 of their officers not living in the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ramsey.
Okay. Just a question on patrol officers that are available in their cars during days, and how many there would be, and how many there would be in nights throughout the year.
So, sir, we operate with 5-person platoons, including a sergeant. So each platoon works 12 hours, be it a day shift or a night shift. We maintain what's called a mandatory minimum for our staffing. So, for example, a minimum on a day shift would be 3 officers. And we do that for 3 officers because, again, when we reference analytics, I know that 3 officers can be augmented by me or by our community service officer or by our other staff. But 3 officers in the general patrol. A night shift, that's 4 officers, so after 6 p.m. But again, also augmented either by myself or my colleague, Staff Sergeant White, that also work until midnight as well, or 11 p.m. rather, and then we stay as well. So we keep to maintain the minimums, but then we augment as required.
Okay.
Does that answer your question, sir? Or?
Yeah, so there'd be
Okay.
three staff during the day, 3 staff at night.
Now let me caveat the
But
minimum.
you could add to
Yeah,
that.
that would be the lowest we would allow.
Okay. Thank you.
Ma'am.
Hi, good evening. My name is Stephanie Montfort. I live in Orangeville as well. My question is about the products that we have. We have a brand new phone system that you've installed, security system. I believe it was 2015, 2017, if I could be corrected. So my question is that all this equipment that we've paid for, that we've already paid for, what happens to it if OPP come in?
I'll answer to a point, and I don't want to step on our OPP friends for tomorrow. I was able to do the facilities reviews with their staff this year when they went through several times. They have so many buildings, they need to have a certain standard so that it's one video system, one phone system, so they can maintain it across the buildings. Those are not the same as ours, unfortunately. So what would happen to that is that those would return to be town assets and then have to be dealt with according to whatever the town chooses to do at that point.
So it's lost revenue, possibly. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Shirley Ramsey, and I am resident in the town. My question is with regard to the specialized personnel that the force has. I'm just curious how much a drug recognition expert costs. I'm not sure what type of officer that person would be, but I'm curious about the cost of that kind of a person on the staff.
Yes, ma'am. A drug recognition officer is well, it can be any officer. So we require him to be, at least him or her to be rather, at least first class constable, so 5 years of experience. And with that, they build on hopefully a toxicolizer or breathalyzer course, the alcohol portion. Once we have that foundational training and experience, and then we could apply for the drug recognition training, which is an additional 2 weeks of a very heavy academic at the police college, followed by another week, actually at a facility in Jacksonville in our most recent case. The officer goes and they worked in just outside a methadone clinic. And they had a constant flow of people that were on various drugs, and they were able to test those to get the certification. And after that, so many other certification trials. Their tests are examined by the Center for Forensic Science, and they're then qualified as an expert for us. So that's probably a little more lengthy technical you're looking for, but cost-wise,
yes.
Right now under the federal government, the cost of the academic portion was free. Well, free as in we pay the salary, but no cost of the academic training in the OPC. The actual cost to Jacksonville was flight and meals and hotel for us, but not for the training. That was subsidized by the federal government.
So do they fall into a special classification of constable or officer, as you showed on the slide?
He's still a constable, yes.
Okay, so
I'm referencing Constable Brennan right now.
he's a constable, classed as a constable.
He's a constable right now, and he works in our uniform patrol division.
Okay, and is there only one on staff here?
Yes, it's a very difficult resource to acquire. With the legislative changes in last year, because of the length of training and the organizational and the cost to it, it was very difficult to get a spot.
Okay.
So they're large services with 2 and 3 of them.
Sir.
Okay, thank you.
Trevor Castiglione. I was wondering if you guys could maybe answer this. It's not an easy question, but how many times does the Orangeville Police Service have to assist OPP for out of its area calls because there's no OPP officers available?
The Orangeville Police Service and the Ontario Provincial Police work hand in hand. We will assist them whenever they require. I don't have that statistic in front of me. That's something that we do track. But we're police officers for the province of Ontario, and we share the opportunities to help one another. Calls in and around the Orangeville area would very easily defer to us if they request that.
Thank you.
Sir. State your name for the record, please.
My name is James Jackson, and I am an Orangeville resident. I prefer not to say my address. I just actually have one question for those three right there. Who do you guys answer to? That's all I want to know.
The chief of police answers to the police services board.
But then that wouldn't it been actually you were answering to the people of the town of Orangeville?
We are accountable to the town of Orangeville people. Yes.
And then the last thing I wanted to say is just thank you for answering the call for help for myself.
You're welcome, sir.
Hi, Jennifer Borgard again. Currently, we have a chief and a deputy, so I'm just trying to get the names here, who are present in the community 24/7, 365, correct? Am I correct in assuming that?
You're correct.
Having, for the OPP to have to split time amongst other communities because they won't just be policing Orangeville, and they'll be sharing with different county, what presence would we see in town for a role like a chief or deputy chief?
Give me that again.
Okay, I may have worded it poorly. So you guys work all the time, and I see you everywhere. My curiosity is if we go to a larger force, like the OPP that polices larger community, would we see the same presence of chief and deputy chief 24/7, 365 days a year from the OPP?
That would be a question specifically to the OPP.
Okay.
I can tell you that in the Orangeville Police Service, we're visible in the community, not because we have to. It's a sense of our duty. We're bound by our sense of duty. We are accountable to the taxpayers in Orangeville. And because we're so engaged in the community, we know what the community wants, what the community is talking about, where the problems are, and how we can work in partnership to resolve things.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sir.
Rob Strang, 5 Feet Street, Orangeville. I'm self-employed in Orangeville. Many years ago, one of my clients, sketchy client, tried to stiff me, and he wrote me a check that bounced in Orangeville. So I was annoyed, so I called up the Orangeville Police, and unfortunately I don't remember the officer's name, but somebody followed up with that, and he was very diplomatic, but I guess persistent because, I don't know if he threatened the guy or whatnot, but he paid me. And when I mention that to other business people in other communities, they're kind of shocked and amazed. And I'm just wondering, if that happened today, would a local business still get that level of service?
We actually pride ourselves on engagement with not only the taxpayer, but our main purpose as a police service is the protection of life and property. And we pride ourselves not only in giving that special customer service, we follow up on all our calls. If the officer on the front line can't deal with it, it goes to the Criminal Investigations Bureau. And we have a significant clearance rate that we're very proud of. So yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sir, name and address for the record, please.
It's Dennis Middlebrook on Little York Street. I just have to add to his, I actually had the same instance where a guy got an ice cream cone for $4.25 and walked away. He said, "Thank you very much." I asked him if he wanted to pay me, and he said no, and he came back. And because a police officer went and talked to him, and he came back and actually did some duty work because he couldn't afford it. So it was kind of nice. It's kind of funny that somebody else had the same instance. Anyways, my question today is, I heard you guys say that the Orangeville Police Service is fiscally responsible. What does that actually mean?
Thank you, sir. Fiscally responsible actually is one of our values that you'll see on the chart around the police station. And what that really means is we've used a number of strategies to mitigate expenses, drive revenues. Take our model and think outside of the standard policing silo, which was we are entitled to a portion of the tax levy. We ask, you give, no questions. And policing's developed so much beyond that in the last 15 to 20 years that now we articulate what are the needs, and we weigh those things out. So for example, when we purchased laptops for the cruisers, we successfully were able to do service delivery faster, more effectively using software and technology, which ultimately reduces our costs and allows our communicators to do other things, or reducing our burden somewhere else and adds capacity such that we use that for the third-party record checks and drives more revenue. Along with that is a strategy for human resources, which is keeping people at work. and I'll applaud our HR reps as well, is to make sure that we have anybody off, that we get them back to work, and they're doing valuable work to our organization, even if it's a broken foot, for example, that they're back to work and they're helping and they're picking up administrative tasks. So it's using our resources the best we can to mitigate calls. We've also introduced a swing shift, let's say between 3 p.m. and 3 a.m., because that's the bulk of when our calls occur. It covers half that day and night shift, and therefore I'm reducing overtime. I'm not keeping that day shift on longer, and yet that call is done before they leave at 3 o'clock in the morning. So it's those type of strategies, and it's really multifaceted. I'm giving you lots of information here, but it's an overall combined to be fiscally responsible. We look at our capital purchases and try to do it in a timely manner, think years ahead, which I guess strategically would be the best way to describe it. So when we were looking at radio infrastructure a couple of years ago, my first question is, how long is this going to last? What do we need? What do we have to put away so that transition is easy for this community? I'm not going back saying I need another $2 million or $10 million because we need a radio system. Whoops, forgot about it. We plan for that, and we're ahead of that game from IT and infrastructure, cars, you name it. So it's that kind of strategy that's really driven the success. And I have to certainly, Chief Kalinsky, last few years bringing that model, supporting that model, has really driven our success here.
Thank you.
Very good. So thank you. Pretty close.
Thank you.
Just a question again with regards to the finances. You had mentioned that some of your numbers were maybe a little off the mark as far as what's in the presentation. Okay. When all of this is being analyzed, I understand the town has a consultant. Who would be providing the financial numbers to the consultant? Would it come from the police department, like from the types of numbers you put together, or is it just from the treasurer?
I'll take that, sorry, numbers back. We'll provide our stats, our performance analytics, and we have the budget. We'll then partner with our treasury, and Mr. Mitchell is actually the consultant sitting in one of the rows here. We may be able to answer that more fulsome, but we would focus on analytics. As I said, the budget itself is the treasury budget. That is the source document for all of our information.
Okay, because when you just look at costs separately from the revenue, and the reason I do that is because the revenue, I'd say 60-70% of that is provincial grants that get you to your $1.9 or $2 million range. Going back to 2016, your costs were like $8.6 million. 2017, $9.3 million. 2018 was $9.4 million. And this year, according to the budget, it's $10 million. According to your presentation there, it's $10.2 million. So I was wondering, is it going to be this presentation that he's getting the numbers from, or the actual results from the ledger?
The numbers that will be used will be supplied by Treasury.
Okay, not what we're seeing here on these, not the numbers that you're adding up. Because even if you take a look at your cost, your three cost categories, like the salary benefits for uniform and civilian, then you add your other costs. If you add those together and you subtract that from what you call revenue, it doesn't give you your net bottom line. I mean, you can just use a calculator and come up with that math error.
At the end of the day, we rely on people that know the numbers best, and that would be Treasury.
Okay.
We get a hunk of money at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year, and we do what we can to ensure that we are fiscally responsible. Everything we do.
The reason I ask is because, like, I've been investigating a lot of these numbers from what I call the financial numbers from the budget. Some of those numbers I get from some of the counselors here, and they get it from your department, or they get it from the treasurer. Some of the information I get off the town's website from past budgets, as well as what they call I forget the proper name, it's what the auditor reviews. It's the financial audited results. And it's very hard to put together what the true costs are as a resident. But from what I can see, the true costs are going up significantly every year. The only reason that we don't see it so much as a taxpayer is because in a lot of cases, many of the departments within the town, including the police, budget high, so we don't come in and hit the bottom. Like, we don't hit the ceiling of what the budgets were. But if you take a look at what's been happening with the cost within the police force over the last 4 years, plus what the budget is, which has been pretty flat, we're getting right to that point where we're actually over budget by a couple $100 right now, according to your chart there. So I'm just wondering, well, I guess you kind of answered the question that the treasurer will be working with a consultant, not from the numbers provided by the police department.
All I can say to you, sir, is we've been fortunate enough to have a 0% increase for the last 5 years while maintaining a level of service that we are very proud of.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
It's me again. So if we're gonna talk numbers, I want to go back to the last costing, because I remember at that time the process of the costing, from what I remember, prevented the OPS from actually seeking new revenue sources. That was part of the agreement, I understand, from the last discourse from the costing. So I'm curious around numbers. If you're looking historically, maybe we want to factor in a little bit some of the politicizing activity that has negated some of the efforts that I think you've already demonstrated very quickly have regenerated into some decent revenue. Further to that, if I can just simplify your presentation, because I like to make things into imagery, my sense is that we have a pretty decent home. And I think we have a home that is well put together. It's responsive to the people who live there. The proposal for going, say, to OPP, from what I remember from last time, and going into this costing is more like buying a new home, building a new home. And if you've ever been to a model home, the first thing you begin to recognize is that everything is an extra. Everything is an upgrade that you have to pay for. My sense, based on the last experience we had with the costing and going through this again, it still seems to be presenting the same way no matter how you present the numbers. That what we own outright right now is coming in at budget or under budget, services the needs of the community exceptionally well, and we would then go into a realm of fiscal unknowns. And I remember from going through the costing process the last time, I believe we found out that it would not be beneficial. So I'm just clarifying. Am I correct in that?
Well, we are looking forward to the consultant's report that will put an end to any misconceptions or rumors or hopes or wishes. I think we put everything on the table and let the consultant do his work. And at the end of the day, it's a decision made by council. But we continue to do what we do best in the community each and every day.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My question goes back to one of the first slides in your presentation, where you were talking about the number of calls according to different categories. And you started with the highest, of course, but two of the most significant categories included the categories of community services and police information. And I was just curious, what is included in things like community service and police information? I really couldn't think what that could include.
Well, thank you. The community services incidents, if you recall earlier when I said we need to articulate what we do. And one of those things is creating an incident or a call for service for what we do. So when Constable Davis goes to a school to present something, a program or whatever, that community service incident is created. When Constable Lemke goes to the BIA meeting or some other activity like that, an incident is created. Again, it gives us the ability to articulate back to our community, here's what we do. Here's the value for your service.
Okay.
Police information is a broad category that, in my professional opinion, we want to continue to shrink, so we articulate it even better. It's a generic category for a number of things. It could be a notice from another police agency that this wanted person may be traveling through your area. It's information we created in our record management system for officers to have knowledge of, but we may not necessarily act on that. That could be but a scam. It's general information things rather than action. We record it for purposes that we may need at another time.
Okay.
Yeah, so so it's probably not a great explanation, but it's a really broad category, and we do our best to make sure it's more appropriate.
Okay,
Appropriately
thank you.
rated.
Yes, sir.
Trevor Castiglione again. I know you guys are having your revenues, shall we say, hindered by all this process. Will the Orangeville Police be bidding on the 911 service that will be coming up for contract renewal?
Yes, we are.
And when is that?
We attended and I believe this is a public session, the Government Services Committee, at which point the recommendation was to hold the 911 service still in Sudbury for Northern 911. At the completion of our costing process, then we can bid for that, as we are technically a non-profit agency that can be single source to us.
So
And
in
return
other
the service
words,
here.
We have to wait for revenue because of all of this nonsense. Okay, thanks.
Sir.
My question through you, Mr. Mayor, is to the panel, whoever wants to answer. Could you please tell us what is the number of calls that we had in our police force over a course of many years? What was the highest? And the reason I ask this question, because the OPP charge over and above the actual contract for those calls. So any idea what was the highest that we ever had in calls coming in for service?
2016. One moment, please. We're looking that up for you.
Okay, thank you.
In 2016, we had 22,924 calls for service.
Okay, thank you. The reason of my question is because there is no way that the OPP can put a number, or either a consultant can put a number to those calls. Those calls could be 10,000, could be 22, could be 50. How would I know? How anybody knows as the town grows? So I want to make everybody aware of that. Thank you.
Ma'am, your name for the record?
Tina Hinsperger. I reside in Orangeville. I just wanted to, I have a question with respect to possibly looking at some other options. The town of Amherstburg near Windsor underwent a similar exercise, and I'm originally from Windsor. That council determined that there were too many unknowns to move forward with OPP. They decided instead to amalgamate with Windsor Police Forces, and I still have family in Windsor. I happen to know that that amalgamation is working quite well between Windsor and Amherstburg. And while I personally do not believe that there is a need for cuts in policing, I believe that we already have a very fiscally sound police service, and I'm very happy to contribute to that. Have any other towns approached Orangeville Police Services to maybe amalgamate if there is that need, either now or in the future, to save some money, like even perhaps maybe some of the smaller towns or smaller areas in Dufferin County who may want to look at a municipal model?
So amalgamation is always an option. We respond back to what the decision of council is and of our police services board. So it's strictly a political decision, but if you ask me if we'd be capable of increasing our footprint in Dufferin County, we're more than capable. We have the infrastructure in place. We have great infrastructure, and it's not our decision at the end of the day. We rely back to council and to our police services board to make that decision and for them to tell us how they'd like us to proceed. So it's a government position that that needs to be flushed out with the politicians.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Jackson.
I'm actually bringing this up to ask as a representative. I've been sent this. As leaders of the Orangeville Police, do you feel that the cost difference between the OPP and the OPS is one that gives added value back to the community due to the additional services that are provided that would not be included as a base service by the OPP? I can say that again if you want.
No, I actually understood that.
Okay.
I can tell you what the Orangeville Police Service does, and I'm going to ask you if you have questions for the Ontario Provincial Police, you'll have to refer that to them. They are a great police service with men and women just as dedicated as we are.
Cool. Thank you.
Sir.
Rob Strang, 5 Feet Street. A few years ago, I guess quite a few years ago, there seemed to be a fair bit of litigation going either with internally in the Orangeville Police Service or externally with public. Is there still litigation going on? Because it seemed to cost us a fair bit in legal fees, if I recall.
The short answer is no.
No, there isn't any?
There's always legal costs, but if you want specific details, I know in 2013 there was over $700,000 in legal costs. In 2014, $752,000. This administration took over in December of 2014, and I can tell you that in 2015 our costs were reduced to $92,000, and in 2016, $37,000.
Thank you.
I can continue with that. In 2017, $56,000. In 2018, there are $42,000.
Very good. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Sir.
Chris Halliday, reporter with the Orangeville Banner. I'm seeing a lot of talk about calls for service. I see it marked as calls for service up here. I see the same number marked as occurrences in your annual report. I'm just trying to figure out, can you explain the difference, if there is a difference between calls for service and occurrences? And why would the figures be listed as calls for services in here and general occurrences in your annual report?
They're essentially interchangeable terms, Chris.
Okay.
For the record, who are you?
Don Kidd, Orangeville, and I'm wearing these. If anyone wants to know after the meeting, I will certainly give my doctor down at Sunnybrook Hospital, and they can tell him that Don Kidd doesn't need his sunglasses on at night anymore. I got one question. Do the costs, which the chief just spoke of, $37,000, does that include settlements of lawsuits? And are there any ongoing lawsuits at the moment?
The last lawsuit that was settled under a disclosure of we weren't allowed to talk about it. I don't believe that we're facing any lawsuits currently. But let me caucus just for a minute.
Chief, speak into the microphone.
I don't know.
We don't currently have any lawsuits pending.
Thank you.
Sorry, Noel Ramsey again. I've asked this question of the treasurer, and I think I might be getting an answer, but it was just recent. I noticed in the budget process, there's many departments within the corporation town of Orangeville, but there's also other departments that really don't show up as if we would recognize them. One of them is called, it's not even a department, it's called corporate allocations. And I noticed the reason I came across corporate allocations is because going through all the lines in all the departments, I came across insurance, and insurance in public works almost went from $200,000 a year, it disappeared. It went to like, I forget, $15,000. Later on, when we were looking at the OPS costs, I noticed that your insurance that was going up significantly from 2016, 2017, 2018, it was ramping up significantly. All of a sudden, it actually dropped off down to, I believe it's around $124,000 that you're paying insurance, which is liability. The reason I mention this is because across the whole town, it looks like the majority or the bulk of the insurance has been pulled back into corporate allocations. Corporate allocations now holds almost $7 million worth of costs. So my question is, the corporate allocations elements that are pulled out of each department, including yours, it only really affects yours because that's the exercise we're doing. All the corporate allocations that were pulled out, costs, are they being put back in to show a true cost of the police department?
I feel that that's a question that would be best answered by Treasury. They're the experts. I can only tell you as a police officer, we have a set number of, we have a set budget, and we have operated fiscally responsible for 5 years in a row without an increase to our budget. So any insurance-related question would be captured in our budget, but I defer that to the Treasury Department.
My question goes really beyond the insurance. It's whatever other elements corporate allocations has pulled out. They pull it out of everybody else's department too, by the way. But whatever they pulled out of your department, is that being considered by the consultant or seen by the consultant when they're treasurer in this, like the financials exercise?
Sorry, if I can add one piece. We're given an allotment each year when we go through the budget process of what the insurance costs will be. We can't speak to the municipalities' corporate allocations and what those costs are. Probably Mr. Brennan or our treasurer would be better able to give you a more fulsome answer. Whether that information be passed along to the consultant, again, I'll rely on Mr. Mitchell to liaise with those two individuals and get the best answer. I know we're told you have to budget for $124,000 in insurance, and that's what we do.
Okay.
To keep it simple, I mean, it's a joint process.
Okay. Okay, well, so I'll just come right out and ask this question because, I mean, this is what this whole exercise is about. Well, I'd say half of it is about, because a lot of it is about how you feel about the services you're getting. From a taxpayer point of view, some people are more focused on the financial implications and the cost. In our last tax bill, there was a footnote in there that's saying that 23% of our municipal tax is for policing services. I did some calls to actually quite a few other municipalities, some small cities, some very large towns, as well as other rural municipalities. And generally speaking, they all came back around that their cost of policing is around 16, 14, 15% of their municipal taxes. Ours are at 23. I can't get a percentage for all the municipalities, and I can't get a cost for all the municipalities that have their own like police force, but I can for the OPP. The OPP, there's 290 municipalities in Ontario that they cover, 1.1 million properties. Their average cost is $359 per household. Now I know there's lots of variances because it goes down to 200 and it goes up to like 600 and change. My question to you is, and this is in the Q&A that you can submit on the Orangeville website. Someone else asked a question. In part of the response that came back, they said that using the cost of 9.96 million, that's without the revenue, that the cost per household for policing in Orangeville, this is from the town, is $1,011. After the revenue is applied, it comes down to $822. My question is, have you ever looked at other police departments, whether they're OPP covered municipalities or like Dufferin Police or York Region Police, to find out why your costs are so much higher than theirs? Because, I mean, that's what everyone's trying to figure out. So my question would go back, throw it over to you, because everyone's got an opinion that, you know, oh, the OPP is going to cost a whole lot more, or someone else's numbers aren't correct. But the general consensus with so many people is that it's costing too much. So the question over to you is, have you looked at your cost to other police departments to find out, are you in line, and where are you not in line?
I think in order for me to give you a fulsome answer, I would have to consult with the Treasury Department to find out the actual numbers that Orangeville uses. I can appreciate the fact that some people think it's more expensive in Orangeville, and I understand that. I need some additional information from Treasury in order to make an informed response to you.
Okay. I'll let
Ma'am.
Stephanie Monforts again. I just had a quick question in regards to your budget. So we have our budget. If there is an additional 500 calls or drug charges, and not just the initial drug charge, but there's 3 different drug charges on top of it, does your budget change? So does that cost more for the police officer to turn around and do the 3 charges? Because is it just a blanketed number, or is there additional costs?
The Orangeville Police is an all-inclusive, standalone service. What you get is what you get. We don't charge up above and beyond for anything.
So if we need extra
services,
yes,
it's included.
Patrol at schools, surveillance of something, or
you're not charged any extra, no.
Thank you.
Mr. Driscoll.
This question is for the chief, just to clear the air on something that a previous question was asked. Does the police service board carries insurance if anything happens, like a lawsuit or anything? And let's say, for example, you know, the police service is found guilty of the charge. Who's paying for it? It's my understanding that that's why we have insurance, that the insurance is the one that picks up the tab to pay for it. It doesn't come directly from the taxpayer. What comes directly from the taxpayer is what we pay for the insurance. But Chief, you can elaborate on that.
Yes, we do pay insurance premiums to protect the taxpayer from any liabilities in that respect. So yes, it's included in our budget already.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, we've got about 10 minutes left, so if you have a question, please step up.
Sure.
Mr. Rand.
I think this is probably my last one. Again, going back in the ledger, and this may be a question, I don't know if you have someone within the OPS that actually looks like at your numbers that works with the treasurer. Would that be fair?
There's an analyst that works in Treasury.
Okay, so I don't know if you can answer this question tonight, but you may want to talk to them and get back. Because in the budgets going back over the last 4 years, going back to 2016, there's a line in there called maintenance and repairs, which consistently over the last 4 years, as well as this year, you're budgeting somewhere around $144,000 and $145,000. 2016, you ran up $375,000. 2017, $383,000. 2018, $224,000. So the question would be for your analyst is, why aren't you increasing the budget line from $146,000 when you're typically going $200,000 over it?
Okay, I don't have an answer for you, and I don't know what you're referring to.
Just look in the budget line, in the budget under police, and it's called maintenance and repairs. And again, this is when I went through all the departments. These are the kind of things that jumped out at me.
I think we're going to look for your service. You want to volunteer for some hours, sir?
Gladly.
So I
This is the kind of thing I used to do when I was in the corporate world.
response to some of our budget process, which is when we're looking at some of those line items, whether we recategorize and or a request from the board. So for example, there was a request from the board this year to change our third-party record checks to more of a cost center. So show that salary against the revenue that we can get kind of a termination profit. So each year, some of those line items may change when we look at, it was an anomaly that particular year, and I can't speak to what was purchased there, and then do you reallocate that to a different line item?
Yeah, and when you...
It's kind of a generic answer. I apologize, I can't look at specifics.
Yeah, however, that's something I would see in many departments where something's like right out of fact, right, from a particular year, and usually it's corrected the next year, or it just happened that one year. But this is something that's consistent, maintenance and repairs. You're $100,000 to $250,000 over your budget for that item.
Yeah, I understand, sir. And like I said, we're looking forward to your volunteer hours. Come on in. We work with a fantastic analyst in Treasury, Lena, that does a great job with us, but certainly.
Okay. Hopefully the treasurer can, I don't know, will somebody answer that back on the website, or how does that work, Mr. Mayor?
Well, if the police service could provide an answer after talking to the treasurer and hopefully post it onto the website, that would be the course of action, I would expect. Okay, thank you. We'll have one more question, and then maybe we'll have the chief do a quick 1-minute wrap-up, and we'll adjourn this meeting. Mr. Halliday.
I can appreciate how it's a good news story to have 0% budgets for the last 5 years. If someone were to flip it the other way and suggest perhaps that maybe it's not as responsible to continue to have that 0% budget and not have small increases. The train of thought would be like, if you don't pay now, you're going to pay later. So what would your response to be to someone that thinks 0% budgets over that extended period of time might be irresponsible?
Well, I think it's a good news story that that the Orangeville Police have done the same thing for the previous 5 years. That's not sustainable on the life of expectancy of any police service. But thus far, we continue to build our revenue streams to offset some costs, and we're quite proud of our accomplishments, and we look forward to continuing saving the taxpayer money.
Very good. Okay. So I think before I have to go to council, we're on time with Rogers. They're going to cut us off, James. I'm sorry. You can ask any of these questions to anybody here, any council member. We're happy to take your call tomorrow. Council members, before we wrap up, any questions that any council member would like to ask while we're here? Mr. Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't mean this as grandstanding in any sort of way. This is not a political thing for me. I just wanted to say thank you to the Orangeville Police Service for being here and answering the questions. However, as an observer of the events tonight, I do want to say to everyone, I think it's unfair that these three people have to answer the financial questions in the way that they're put forth. If it were me sitting up there, I wouldn't know the financials either. We have people in the town that would do that. To me, the presentation is incomplete because we don't have those financials, and clearly we'll have to follow up. But I just wanted to make the point that I didn't like that portion of the presentation, not a reflection upon the three of you, but I just thought it was inappropriate, so I wanted to make that known.
Councilors? All good. Chief Kalinsky, do you want to take a minute just to provide a wrap-up, sir?
Thank you very much, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Staff Sergeant Dave McLagan and Deputy Chief Guilfoy for helping out with this presentation. I could have sat here all evening answering questions, but it's obvious to me, and it should be obvious to you, that we have leaders in the organization past the Chief's office that are very capable of doing a great job for the Orangeville Police. We have a model that we all adhere to. That model is something that we're very proud of. We continue to work hard. Our civilian staff, our uniform staff, we are proud to be your police service. I want to remind the public that if they have any further questions or comments, that they can share them not only with the Orangeville Police through the Orangeville Police website, but also through the Orangeville Police Services Board website, and also through the Town of Orangeville website to access your councillors and your mayor directly. I want to thank everybody for their support. I want to acknowledge people taking time out of their busy schedule to be here tonight, and we are proud to be your police service. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Kalinsky and the members, Staff Sergeant McLagan and Deputy Chief Guilfoy. I also wanted to take a moment to thank our friends at Rogers TV for broadcasting this tonight, and of course town staff who's worked diligently to put this night on, and our IT department. This broadcast is available on YouTube if you'd like to watch it again and review the questions. I want to thank all of our councillors and staff for attending tonight, and of course all the people in the audience. So thank you very much for coming tonight. Last order of business, we need to adjourn this meeting. May I have a motion to adjourn? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All in favor? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.